Functions of the cardiovascular are transport nutrients, waste products, gases, and hormones throughout the body, plays a role in the immune response and the regulation of body temperature. The cardiovascular consists of the blood, heart, and blood vessels.
Plasma is a pale yellow fluid that consists of about 91% water, 7% proteins, and 2% other components, such as ions, nutrients, gases, waste products, and regulatory substances. Plasma protein include albumin, globulin, and fibrinogens. The less than 1% means white blood cells and platelets, and 45% means red blood cells.
Red blood cells, also known as erythrocytes. Red blood cells are biconcave discs. They have no nucleus. Red blood cells contain hemoglobin, which colors the cell red. They are about 6.5 to 8.5 micrometers in diameter. The function is to transport oxygen and carbon dioxide.
White blood cells, also known as leukocytes. White blood cells are spherical cells with a nucleus. Functions of the white blood cells are protect the body against microorganisms, remove dead cells, and debris. There is 5 types of white blood cells, each with specific functions. Let's start with the granulocytes. Neutrophil. Nucleus with 2 to 4 lobes. Cytoplasmic granules stain a light pink or reddish purple, 10 to 12 micrometers in diameter. Its function is to destroy microorganisms and other substances. Basophil. Nucleus with 2 distinct lobes. Cytoplasmic granules, stain blue-purple, 10-12 micrometers in diameter. Its function releases histamine, which promotes inflammation, and heparin, which prevents clot formation. Eosinophil. Nucleus often bilobed. Cytoplasmic granules stain orange, red, or bright red, 11 of 14 micrometers in diameter. Its function, it participates in inflammatory response of allergic reaction and asthma, attacks certain worms, parasites.
Agranulocytes. Lymphocytes, round nucleus, cytoplasm, forms a thin ring around the nucleus, 6 to 14 micrometers in diameter. Produces antibodies and other chemicals responsible for destroying microorganisms. Monocyte. Nucleus round, kidney-shaped or horseshoe-shaped, contains more cytoplasm than lymphocyte, 12 to 20 micrometers in diameter. Phagocytic cell. In the blood, leaves the blood and becomes macrophage. Platelet. Cell fragment surrounded by a plasma membrane and containing granules 2 to 4 micrometers in diameter. Forms platelet plugs, releases chemicals necessary for blood clotting.
The heart is approximately the size of a closed fist and is located in the pericardial cavity.
Functions of the heart. The heart generates blood pressure. The heart routes through the systemic and pulmonary circulations. Pulmonary circulations move blood between the heart and the lungs. Systemic circulation moves blood between the heart and the rest of the body to provide oxygenated blood. The heart's pumping action and its valves ensure a one-way flow of blood through the heart and the blood vessels. The heart helps regulate blood supply to the tissues.
The heart has 4 chambers, a right and left atrium, and a right and left ventricle. Route of blood flow through the heart. Blood enters the right atrium through the superior and inferior vena cava, and from heart muscles through the coronary sinus. Most of the blood flowing into the right atrium flows through the tricuspid valve into the right ventricle. Following right atrial contraction, the right ventricle begins to contract. This contraction pushes blood against the tricuspid valve, forcing it closed. After pressure within the right ventricle increases, the pulmonary semilunar valve is forced open, and blood flows into the pulmonary trunk. As the right ventricle relaxes, the backflow of blood forces the pulmonary semilunar valve to close. The pulmonary trunk branches to form the right and left pulmonary arteries, which carry deoxygenated blood to the lungs, where carbon dioxide is released and oxygen is picked up. Blood returning from the lungs enters the left atrium through the pulmonary veins, carrying oxygenated blood. Most of the blood flowing into the left atrium flows into the bicuspid valve into the left ventricle. Following left ventricular contraction, this pushes blood against the bicuspid valve, forcing it closed. After pressure within the left ventricle increases, the aortic semilunar valve is forced open, and blood flows into the aorta. Blood flowing through the aorta is distributed to all parts of the body, except to those parts of the lungs supplied by the pulmonary blood vessels. The normal ECG consists of a P wave, a QRS complex, and a T wave. The P wave results from depolarization, and the beginning of the P wave precedes the onset of atrial contraction. The QRS complex consists of 3 individual waves, the Q, the R, and S waves. The QRS complex results from depolarization of the ventricles, and the beginning of the QRS complex precedes ventricle contraction. The T wave represents repolarization of the ventricles, and the beginning of the T wave precedes ventricular relaxation. Bradycardia, heart rate less than 60 beats per minute. Possible causes: excessive vagus nerve stimulation, non-functional SA node, and carotid sinus syndrome. Tachycardia, heart rate in excess of 100 beats per minute. Possible causes: elevated body temperature, excessive sympathetic stimulation, toxic conditions. There are 3 major types of blood vessels. The vessels that carry blood away from the heart are called arteries, and their very small branches are arterioles. Capillaries are minute-thin walled vessels that connect the arterioles and venules. It is through the capillaries that nutrients and waste are exchanged between the blood and the body tissues. Very small branches that collect the blood from the various organs are called venules, and they unite to form veins, which return the blood to the heart. Blood pressure. Blood pressure is a measure of the force exerted by blood against the blood vessel walls. Blood pressure can be measured by listening for carrot cough sounds produced as blood flows through arteries partially constricted by a blood pressure cuff. In a normal adult, blood pressure fluctuates between 120 systolic and 80 diastolic. Functions of the urinary system: removes waste products from the blood and the body, balance the body fluids, release hormones to regulate blood pressure, and control production of red blood cells. The main structures that make up the urinary bladder are the kidneys, ureters, urinary bladder, and urethra. The kidney produces urine through 4 steps. 1. Glomerular filtration creates a plasma-like filtrate of the blood. 2. Tubular reabsorption removes useful solutes from the filtrate, returns them to the blood. 3. Tubular secretion removes additional waste from the blood, adds them to the filtrate. 4. Concentration removes water from the urine, concentrates waste. Kidneys. The kidney removes urea from the blood through tiny filtering units called nephrons. Each nephron consists of a ball formed of small blood capillaries called a glomerulus and a small tube called a renal tubule. Urea, together with water and other waste substances, forms the urine as it passes through the nephrons and down the renal tubules of the kidney. Ureters. These two narrow tubes carry urine from the kidneys to the bladder. Muscles in the ureter walls continually tighten and relax, forcing urine downward, away from the kidneys. If urine backs up or is allowed to stand still, a kidney infection can develop. About every 10 to 15 seconds, small amounts of urine are emptied into the bladder from the ureters. Bladder. This triangle-shaped hollow organ is located in the lower belly. It is held in place by ligaments that are attached to other organs and the pelvic bones. The bladder walls relax and expand to store urine, and contract and flatten to empty urine through the urethra. The typical healthy adult bladder can store up to 2 cups of urine for 2 to 5 hours. Urethra. This tube allows urine to pass outside the body. The brain signals the bladder muscles to tighten. This squeezes urine out of the bladder. At the same time, the brain signals the sphincter muscles to relax to let urine exit the bladder through the urethra. When all the signals happen in the correct order, normal urination happens.